Hey, welcome to the Star Wars Unlearned podcast. My name is Josiah Shuett, and I'm joined by Nathan Hawley. What we're doing is we're looking at Star Wars from the perspective of its creator. So we're turning off our fan brains and really just trying to uncover the story that Lucas is trying to tell. We're in the middle of our series on the Phantom Menace, where we explore the filmmaking, the history, the mythology, and everything else that Lucas and his team used to bring this first chapter of the Star Wars saga to life. So join us as we dive in and unlearn what we have learned about the Star Wars story.
So I think, yeah, so we basically, where we left off, it's just cut back to the lightsaber fight as they're kind of still fighting in the hangar, I think, right?
Yes,
I would
correct.
love to start off with the music, if you
Oh
if you're
man,
up for it.
it sounds fantastic. Yeah, yep.
All right.
Talk about a
So
podcast in and of itself. Oh man.
yes, exactly. We could do many podcasts just on the music to start with. And I think we should at
So
some point.
good.
The music here is interesting. We talked about it a little bit last time. We have a chorus this time. We have voices that have been brought in. And I think, do you know anything before I go into it? I don't want to bore you with something you already know, but how much do you know about the words they're saying and where that language, the idea to have that kind of chanting chorus comes from?
Only a little bit. I'm actually trying to find it. Because just in the archive book, John Williams said, "Duel of Fates is for the great sword fight at the end of the film. The decision to make that choral was just the result of my thinking that it should have a ritualistic or quasi-religious feeling to it. And an introduction of a chorus might just be the thing." So I thought that was cool. And I've been struck by this, how many just religious themes George has been putting in. You know, like he said in the archive book, like the Force is supposed to be a metaphor for God. And we're supposed to be learning like spiritual lessons throughout Star Wars. Now, of course, he would not hold to Orthodox Christianity at all, but there is a lot of influence there. And that was cool. I never heard that before about particularly the choral part of it. Because I know that kind of caused a big ruckus when this first came out, like, whoa, this is so different, because there was never choral music in Star Wars. But now it is, and I remember a lot of people being tripped up by that. But no, I've never heard the lyrics. I've just heard people's goofy interpretations, like mocking it kind of thing.
Little story there. When I was a kid, my very little kid watching this, I would go around the house with my little Darth Maul lightsaber and run around, and I would just sing the song, but I didn't know what the lyrics were. So I just, what I heard as a kid was Darth Maul, Darth Maul, Darth Maul, Darth Maul. I would just say that over and over again.
That's great.
I'm sure I wasn't alone in that, but I drove my parents nuts, I'm sure. What's interesting, you say that there was a little bit of discourse, a little bit of furor kicked up with the fandom with the choral piece there, because there is choral music in the original trilogy, just a little bit at the very end of Return of the Jedi, another lightsaber battle at the very end.
Oh yeah, I guess I wouldn't have thought about it as choral.
Right after Luke screams "never," and then he starts going, and he hacks off Vader's arm. That little sequence there, you hear the voices come in, and that's, I think, the only time in the original trilogy that they brought in a choir for that.
Wow, good point. You're talking about Palpatine's theme? Is that what you mean?
No, it's not necessarily. I wouldn't call it a theme. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're right. Palpatine's theme does have vocals in it. You're right. Sorry, good catch. But in terms of that was like a male ensemble, or it might have been a full male choir doing that part. But there's a whole male, female, huge chorus that comes in for the final fight with Vader and Luke as they start to fight onto that catwalk before Luke chops off his hand.
Oh, good catch.
And it's I wouldn't say it's not really a theme that ever shows up again. I think it's just unique to that moment in the film. But again, it also, as we'll talk about with this scene, there is a much larger scale and scope to that fight than what we see. Like, it has resonances for the characters, it has resonance for the galaxy. There's a lot more happening than just on the surface, which actually has to do with the lyrics for this for the Duel of Fates here. But so it was appropriate in that moment to bring in the chorus for the first time fully, as you mentioned, which, thank you for bringing that up, because it was going to make me sound very stupid, as if I forgot that the Emperor had a theme male chorus going on. But full chorus, a full measure of the voices going at it for the first time, I think, was in Return of the Jedi. So it's interesting to me that people didn't like it, or would have thought of it as being unique. It is used in a unique way in this film. Yeah, more religious and sound, and more I don't know, spiritual, or chant, like, kind of as a way to talk about it. But it's interesting. Because of course I wasn't aware of that. I was I don't know if I was fully online yet as a human at that point. So who knows? I remember.
Still loading.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Man, that's interesting. I never even like nobody has ever said that. Oh yeah, think back to Return of the Jedi. There's a ton of choral stuff, like with the Emperor stuff, and then of course at the end with the Ewoks, their song. Man, no one ever talks about that. So I wonder if, I wonder why that's such a big deal. Maybe it's just because it's so different. I mean, this feels like a huge choir singing lyrics. I mean, you had a little bit of that with Empire or Return of the Jedi, but I guess it wasn't quite as grandiose, maybe. But yeah,
it definitely had a different feel. Yeah, and it's just I think it's part of it's just by that point, Return of the Jedi was it was like 17 years or something like that when between Jedi and Phantom Menace. But at that point, people are just so used to something. So even if it's just slightly different, it's still choral music, but it's just different.
Yeah,
it's used differently. We've talked about back in, as we know, about a fandom base, we get so used to what Star Wars is. Anytime something new gets introduced, it always sends shockwaves. You know, Empire from the beginning, Star Wars was Star Wars for about 3 years, and then Empire Strikes Back came out, and all of a sudden it was very different. Everyone's like, "Whoa, what's this?" And then you get used to that for a couple of years, and then Return of the Jedi comes in. Whoa, teddy bears, what's going on? It's just every time you get used to it, and the more time you have between installments, the more time Star Wars has time to solidify, and it hardens. You know, it's kind of like lava; it cools down, it turns into a rock, and like it's unmovable in the eyes of the fans at some point. And then George likes to take a chisel and crack it, and like, nope, there's this new thing. Like, what? And that's just true. Not Star Wars. That's any kind of fan base. That's religion too, right? That's any kind of figure in history who came on the scene with new ideas. And Jesus, he rocked the boat with his ideas. It seemed at that point thousands of years of what people thought they knew, and he shattered that. So that's just
good point. We don't like change.
That's human nature. Yeah, we hate change. Exactly. Like Anakin Skywalker, we don't like change. So maybe that's just a bit of that. But
that's true. Anyway. Now you say that, I remember someone. I mean, I wasn't really. I was kind of where you were with the prequels for the old trilogy. Like I was pretty young when they came out. Some of them came out before I was born. The first two, and so I was totally not aware of a lot of that. But I've heard a lot of people who were there for Empire Strikes Back that said that overall it really didn't go over super well. It wasn't received well, which is interesting because now it's like everybody's favorite.
Exactly right.
It didn't take long, but it was initially like people, were like, "Whoa, I don't know how I feel about this," and it wasn't super. I mean, it did well in the theaters, but it just wasn't received well by fans for a little bit, I guess, from what I hear. That's shocking because I love it. It's my favorite. But,
Empire, every Star Wars movie got negative reviews, including the first one, including New Hope back in the day. But Empire for sure rocked the boat because the bad guys win at the end of that movie. Like, our hero loses his arm. Han Solo, like, is he coming back? Is he just shipped off to somewhere in the galaxy? Like, we don't know if he's going to say the statue, forever. And so there's a lot. And Luke finds out his dad is Space Hitler. It's like, this is a horrible way to end a movie, but it's also a great way to, thankfully it's not the ending. It's the middle of the story. But it's true. Each Star Wars movie has kind of had sent its own shock waves through the fan base. And this one, I'm sure, even though I don't remember it, I've heard stories about it. Many different things, but I never heard that particular one you brought up, that people had a interesting reaction to the choral music here. Which is a shame, I think, because if you look into it, as we're going to dive into it here, I think it's really, really cool what John Williams is doing here. So he talks about, there's a great a Celtic epic poem that he talks about called Battle of the Trees. And so first of all, everything you just said about that you read from the archives book is 100% true, that he had talked about this idea of something ritualistic or something antique, very old and ancient, kind of would be very effective for this fight, which is first kind of seems counterintuitive, but I think we'll figure that out. We'll figure out why it makes sense as we go through here. But he talked about this poem called The Battle of the Trees. It's a Celtic poem, and there's a line from it that he liked, which was so basically it tells the story of there's two fields of trees that are animated by a druid priest, and they become warriors. And then uncommitted from the druid, the trees again freeze and go back into being trees. So that's basically just the story of it. But there's a line that he likes that was, when translated to English from early Celtic, it was under the tongue root of a fight, or sorry, let me start that again. Under the tongue root, fight most dread, while another rages behind the head. And so John Williams is quoted as saying, says, for no conscious, sensible reason, the idea of a fight, something raging and imagined in the head more than anywhere else, seemed to be a good mystical, cryptic piece of business to use. So he had to translate it into Sanskrit. So the reason we like to sing in Italian is because it doesn't have consonant word endings. The words can carry because and in vowels. Our English is hard to sing because there's a lot of consonants at the end of words. But another language that does that is Sanskrit, which is one of the reasons he used it, because it has that, rathama, like the at the end of the song or end of the word, carries very well, and it sounds really good. And it's good for that kind of chanting, very, very large sound. It works well with a huge choir. So that's why he picked that. And so he just took little phrases from that, little words or syllables from that excerpt. So like dreaded fight or head or other parts of it, and he just translated that into Sanskrit. And so those are the repeated words that the chorus sings throughout the whole song.
Nope, never knew that. That's cool.
So it's kind of interesting. Yeah, and so it's so that there's even built into like the quote unquote lyrics of the song is this idea that there's a battle raging, not just what's happening right in front of us, but in the head. Like there's something larger happening. The concept, there's a war of ideas happening as well. A duel of the fates. So
that's so cool. That's amazing. And just to think, like, how do you come up with that? I mean, that just blows my mind,
I know, it's
to write the music, to think like, here's the inspiration of it, I'm going to take this like ancient poem, and it's just amazing. Yep, there's a reason John Williams is the best.
Totally.
Yeah, wow, that's cool. Deep.
But I have I've got years of notes here. So do you want to say anything before I continue to ramble? You got anything you want to add to this the scene? Because I've been talking a lot.
I'm pretty just awestruck, man. I just every time I go and see the scene or listen to music or even hear you talk, I'm just like, whoa. That's kind of about as deep as I get in it. It's like, it's so cool. I wish I knew more, which is why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of the fun, right? Is like that's kind of what I'm talking about. What I want to talk about is that it is hitting us at a level that's almost ineffable. Like we can't really describe it, or can't really talk about it, especially when you're young. I know there's a lot of people listening to this now going like, these adult children are just like talking about like I'm awed by this, laser swords and robots. Like, no, but it did hit me in a huge way when I was a kid. And it's not just because, as we talked about a million times, not because robots are cool, not because spaceships are cool. It's because it's dealing with, as we've kind of already touched on in this conversation, very, very deep and religious and spiritual ideas. And so, like, even the location of this fight, as we move from the hangar, as Darth Maul whips that piece of debris into the door to open it.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah, exactly. Opens up to this huge, like, basically a power generators or power station, power plant. That space has this very, very interesting quality to it, because I love the locations of the fights in Star Wars. I think sometimes I think the locations are almost more important than the fight choreography itself, at least for me, in order to get me really excited about a fight. Because the location can do so much storytelling, because the characters aren't having a conversation. They are, in a way, they're having a physical conversation with each other. They're having an argument, right? With weapons instead of words. And but that can happen. It happens so quickly, and you can kind of get lost in the energy of that. But where the fight is happening tells you a lot about the fight itself. And so the location of this fight is no accident, right? They're fighting. First of all, our heroes are fighting by, if anyone who never seen Star Wars before, if you showed them Darth Maul, they would describe him as like a demon, like this hellish looking figure, red, creepy, like yellow eyes, the horns. And so they're fighting a demon over this bottomless pit, to hell, like thematically and literally. Things could like fall and go downhill here. So it's a very, very dangerous, precarious situation. There's been a lot of talk about Star Wars lightsaber fights that they happen over chasms and precarious. It's kind of a joke or a meme now, but there's a reason for that. Like, you want to have a fight in a safe, comfy room. Like, there's a reason. Each time there's a battle, there's a lot to be lost, and there's hopefully a lot to be gained too, but you don't know which way it's going to go. So there's always that danger of slipping and falling, not just literally, but also metaphorically. And of course,
cool.
the biggest version of that is Anakin slipping and falling to the dark side when he fights Obi-Wan. Yeah, that's one he already is, but is he too far gone? That's the question there. Is he going to turn into the Darth Vader we know from the original trilogy, or is he can he be brought back at that point? And so that's jumping ahead, but I just love the location of this fight too. I'll talk about it more, but just to state at the beginning here, it shows you so much and tells you so much about what the fight is and what's happening here. Why is there this huge epic chant music happening? Why is there this religious feel? Why is there this hugeness to it? Why is it so much larger? There's a huge ground battle happening that's way bigger, like physically. What's happening here? There's a huge space battle that's happening. Why is this tiny little intimate battle between these three characters? Why does that have such a grandiose feel compared to the other ones?
Well, you gotta tell me because I have no idea.
Well, okay. Yeah, but that was sort of like I don't know why I ended it there. That wasn't really a question. It wasn't really a throw question. Wasn't an actual question. I just felt like ending it there. I was weird. And that bothered me too. But I stopped it there. So I'll just keep talking. But,
that's all good.
Actually, I have a quote from George here actually that I want to talk about. He said, "I wanted to come up with an apprentice for the Emperor who was striking, tough. We hadn't seen a Sith Lord before, except for Vader, of course. And I wanted to convey the idea that the Jedi are all very powerful, but they're also vulnerable, which is why I wanted to kill Qui-Gon. That is to say, hey, these guys aren't Superman. These guys are people who are vulnerable, just like every other person. We needed to establish that, but at the same time, we wanted the ultimate sword fight because they were all very good. It sort of predisposes the sword fight between Anakin and Obi-Wan later on. There's a real purpose to it. You have to establish the rules and then stick with them. The scene illustrates just how Jedi and Sith fight and use lightsabers. So, excuse me. I had the fight continually move locations so that we had some room to do it on various sets. And that was really a callback to the Douglas Fairbanks / Errol Flynn movies. We have a really long, intense sword fight. So another aspect of these locations that George is talking about here is, again, a callback to older films where so many movies now, and in the time of the original Star Wars in the 70s, there's a lot of shootout movies, gun movies, people having shootouts, behind a building, behind cars and stuff. And the classic tradition of Hollywood movies with like a swashbuckling and sword fighting, there was always this kind of progression there. I think of Robin Hood, Errol Flynn movie, like George Lucas was talking about. There's a great fight on the staircase they have, and they move through all these different locations. And so the fact that this fight has different stages, like you start in the hangar, you move to that kind of power plant station, and we kind of get closer, more and more claustrophobic again to this tiny little like shaft that with also is a bottomless pit, but it's more confined there. Each of those rooms have a different feel to it, and that again the locations kind of help tell the story of the fight just as much, if not in a bigger way, than I would say the choreography does.
Boy, never thought about that. It's so cool. But it's interesting because they in the Kenobi show, I don't know if you ever saw that, but the Disney put out, they got a lot of flack for that first fight scene. Well, even both of them, just how dull the location was, because it was just like in a quarry. Yeah. And I felt that, I would never been able to put words to it. But I mean, it just doesn't even hold a candle to these. Any of the saga movies. They're all just so epic and grandiose, and wow. Makes sense. So I felt that, but there's no way I would have been able to articulate that. So it's cool to know.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you watch the progression of each lightsaber fight and talking about release order here, from the first one with Obi-Wan and Vader all the way through to Obi-Wan and Vader in Revenge of the Sith. It's interesting to track how each fight changes, and each fight kind of informs the next one. Because of course, the very first one, the choreography is not that interesting, and they're in one room. There is no location change in the first one. That one's kind of very tame and boring in that sense. And actually, if you look at Attack of the Clones, the fight with Dooku also takes place in one location, as does the fight with Palpatine. A lot of the fights in Revenge of the Sith happen in one location too. So it's not, the location isn't always necessary, but I think my favorite fights is when they do move through it. And actually, I appreciated the Obi-Wan fights in that it was a location, lightsaber fight location we hadn't seen before. It wasn't it was a and they kind of like the dark canyon, like rocky, and also almost like in pitch black. I kind of like it was sort of the idea of Anakin and Dooku in Attack of the Clones, where they're fighting in the darkness for a couple seconds, kind of extrapolated out into like a larger scene, though it wasn't entirely pitch black, with just the lightsabers illuminating them. Because they did that in the Tartakovsky miniseries as well in Clone Wars. There's a sequence where part of the Anakin Asajj Ventress fight, they fight in the darkness there. And I thought it'd be kind of cool to do a lightsaber fight in just pitch black for a bit.
Yeah.
So I appreciated the effort to try and do something different. But I do understand it's such a hard thing to nail down. Like what is a good Star Wars fight? How does it feel? And some people are upset about the Attack of the Clones fight too. After this one, episode 1, people were like, Attack of the Clones one wasn't interesting, which I totally get. It's such what we've learned since Disney has taken over, that it's very hard to make Star Wars. It's very hard Lucas had that special sauce was Lucas, and so now everyone else who's making Star Wars for the end of time is not going to be Lucas, so it's never going to quite be there. But I agree though. I felt that way about the Obi-Wan Kenobi fight, where I thought there's something missing here, and like it's not like it's a bad location, or it's not like it's a bad idea for a. It just didn't quite, whatever it was, just didn't quite add up to. I mean, obviously it's not going to be like this, but even those simple fights in the Star Wars movies, there's always something going on there, even if it doesn't have to be a great location or
absolutely
intense choreography. There's always something happening there that somehow makes it give it a special sauce. Or maybe I'm susceptible to the idea of like, it's that my fandom has hardened, my lava has cooled and hardened, it's unmovable, and so anything new is automatically going to be different and bad. But anyway, but yeah, it's true. Yeah, the locations, like Lucas talked about with Douglas Fairbanks movies and Errol Flynn homage. There's a lot of this going on. This last battle here, there's so many homages, so many references to old films. Lucas is really kind of showing his watch list throughout this end of this movie here. But that movement, the fight taking place through locations and jumping and swinging and all that, that's very the swashbuckling feel to it is very much classic 1930s 40s Hollywood Adventures of Robin Hood kind of feel. But I think that's all the notes I have for that aspect of the fight. If you have any more thoughts on that scene, I don't want to rush us into the next scene with the Gungans, but I think that is the next part.
Yeah, you may bring this up later. I just heard this today on the commentary, how George intentionally finished a lot of the scenes here with a close-up. Did you hear about that? How he wants to I'm trying to remember what he said. The idea was just to like feed into each other. Oh, I can't remember what he said. Do you remember what he said?
Yeah, it's the idea that the character is looking, the close-up of the character's face as if they're kind of looking into the next scene. So Darth Maul, when it ends on a close-up of his face. I think this happens later it's not this scene in particular, but later on you see a close-up of the character's face and they look on. It's as if they're looking into the next edit, the next scene. And so it gives a flow, like Darth Maul is looking at Anakin, or Anakin's looking at Padme, or whatever the cut is. And so that is an editing trick you can use to give flow to a scene change or to an edit, because it can be very, very jarring, because it literally is a complete switch of change, a complete change of location, of tone, of character. Everything's changing in music, sound effects. And so in order to smooth that over, there's all these tricks you can use. And one of those is the audience has been conditioned over the 100 or so, more than 100 or so years of cinematic storytelling we've had, that when you show a character looking at something, a close-up of them, and then you cut to the next thing, that feels like what the character is looking at. That's just what we think. It's like, oh, that character is looking at that object, and you cut back for their reaction. It's kind of just basic cinematic language. So Lucas is kind of using that here, except instead of actually showing you what the character is looking at, he's using it to kind of trick the audience's brain just a little bit. It's not super obvious. You don't really feel it or you're not really aware of it as an audience, but you kind of, it just feels a little more natural when you go from a character's face looking at something to a scene, because it now feels like, oh, they're looking at it, we're looking at it. It flows rather than just random images popping up from different locations. There's a little flow there. I didn't explain that very well, but there's a flow there. It does make sense. It's just kind of hard to explain, so I don't think I did a good job. Anyway.
Yeah, I never picked up on that before. It's just a natural, nice way to tie up the scene, I think, if nothing else, just from a purely consumer perspective on my end. It just brings a kind of a mini closure, I think. Nice transition. And so, because like all the fights are really far back, wide shots. Just get a quick zoom in and then switch to the next scene. Yeah, makes sense to me. Good stuff. And I think too, I didn't think about this, but this is the first time we've seen on screen 2-on-1. I don't think we've ever seen that before, in both in release order Star Wars, but also within the movie. It's kind of neat.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, we'd never seen that, and this is really neat. Neat thing. I know he commented on that in in the archive book. Just real quick, I mean, he just kind of said something like, "Yeah, it's just so much more to focus on, and so much more busy than if you just have 1v1 kind of thing." And yeah, really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is cool. It's a part of that, as I was talking about earlier, that kind of progression from each fight to the next. You get to one of the things you build on. It's like, well, what have I already done? Because you can tell, you can kind of see what he's thinking almost. It's like, what have I already done? What I want? How can I make this different? Should I change the location? Should I change the color of the lightsaber? Should I change the number of blades on the lightsaber? And just sometimes very, very small things, just little changes here and there, just to vary it up. It doesn't have to be a huge, complete reinvention of the lightsaber fight. He just makes these small little shifts here and there just to get our money's worth. Like, we're not going to feel cheated as an audience. Like, yeah, I've seen this before. And it's that's really hard to do. You know, it takes a lot of, sometimes just time. Eventually, you wake up and go to sleep enough days, or eventually you just wake up with an idea. You know, sometimes you can't force it. Just has to. That's sometimes why movies take a long time, is it just takes that long for an idea to germinate, you know, and grow. And oh, that's different. I never would have thought that if I couldn't have forced myself to think about that, but I had a dream last night that inspired it. You know, sometimes stuff like that is how art like this is created. And so it's a hard thing to do when he only has like 3 years between each movie, but he manages to make it, each one feel so fresh and different.
Yeah. Well, you did a good job. So, and this one I think especially was just so groundbreaking. And he commented on that too, and we've talked about before, but just how this is supposed to be the era where the Jedi are, how did he put it? Like, not quite in their prime, but they have being in their prime, you know. This is what the Jedi were made to do, kind of idea. Whereas, the original trilogy, they weren't. Vader's mostly machine, and Luke's, a trainee, and Obi-Wan's dad, and old. So this is like Jedi as they're meant to be Jedi. So, and you see that here in this fight. It's really cool. The flips and the jumps, just the smoothness, and also the pace. We've never seen anything like that before. Yeah. It's just really cool. Well done.
Great. Yep. Very different.
Yeah. So then the scene jumps into the hallway with Padme and Panaka, and then it switches to space.
Yeah. Very, very quick scene there. I'd say pretty self-explanatory. Actually, I think it's at the shot where, isn't the very last shot of that where the droid gets hit and his kind of buddy kind of looks at him like, "Oh no, Jerry got hit," kind of thing. Is it that scene?
I never noticed that before.
You have to flip through it right there and verify. But there's one of those hallway scenes. I always like to end with the two droids, you know, shooting. One of them gets hit, the other one looks at him like, "Oh, I guess that's he's gone." And it's like another kind of humorous bit with the droids, because we always have to have humor with the droids. Where I kind of the way I read it is kind of like, "Oh no, he was my friend." Well, okay, that's the end of him.
I think yeah, there it is. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Wow. Nope. Never noticed that before. There you go.
Like the look he gives. Yeah. It's amazing how much emotion you can read into a face that has no emotion, like 3PO or a droid, where it's like, it looks, you can see the as if there's a character there, as if there's a change or thoughts behind that faceplate, even though there's nothing there out clearly. It's just amazing how much mask, that's an old tradition in storytelling and theater with masks, where the face is unchanging, but the audience can read into, especially if it's a neutral face like 3PO, you can read into the emotion there. It's completely tangential and completely unrelated, but that's the idea of thinking behind, maybe you know this, or for those who don't know listening, the thinking behind 3PO's face and the design of his face was that it was a neutral expression, so that if he was afraid, the face wouldn't interfere with it. If he was happy, the face wouldn't interfere with that emotion. Like, every emotion could be read out of that neutral face.
Boy, and it works. It works great.
Totally works right.
And all of them. I mean, like when you think about it, like Vader, Boba Fett, 3PO, Artoo, all the droids here. It's just like, wow.
Yeah, it's all kabuki theater. It's all Chinese masks. It's really interesting. Yeah,
it's just amazing. Yeah, the power of that. Yeah, because I never once was taken out by any of those Hamilton figures, ever. Even with the new Mandalorian series, same deal.
Yeah.
I've never been taken out of it, never been like, oh, that's just stale or anything. It's amazing how much we just put onto it.
Yeah, and there's this interesting trend in another example I think of is Halo, where a character you never see his face, but
Oh yeah.
But the players of the game can kind of put themselves into that suit, they can project their own emotions, their own thoughts into that blank slate of a character, Master Chief. And I know a lot of people have kind of gotten upset by the new Halo TV series because they show his face so much. He takes his helmet off, and he's so much of a character underneath that.
Interesting.
I think that was done an effort because it came out around the same time as Mandalorian, so they were trying to avoid being compared to Mandalorian. They didn't want to do another series with the character that just has a helmet on the entire time. But I think that's at least that's what I've heard. That was the reasoning for it. But I think a lot of fans, including myself, of Halo, were like, no, it's fine. Like we're okay with that. We can have more than one. We're still gonna watch it. We're not gonna not watch it because like, oh, I'm watching this other sci-fi, helmeted character, show. It's like they're not that similar. We want both. And you see this in superhero films too, where especially any superhero wears a mask. They're always taking it off to act. And obviously, you need to see their face for expression sometimes, but a lot of it is, you paid a lot of money for this big star. You want to see Robert Downey Jr.'s face because he's paid a lot of money for it. So you better have the camera cut inside his helmet every once in a while. I'm fine with that, but I'm a huge Spider-Man fan, as you know. And for those listening, I'm a huge Spider-Man fan. And so it always kind of bothers me. In the comics, he never takes his mask off that much, but in the movies, like the last act of the movie, he's always taking his mask off because he's got to cry or he's got to react in some way. When I understand that, cinematically understand the reasoning behind it, part of me's just like, I think you could read that through the mask too. I feel like there's, especially using the camera, again, like kind of we talked about, it's not just what the character's face looks like, it's what you cut to in the next shot that informs the performance, what they're looking at, and then their reaction to it can change. You can have this. So this is, maybe I've talked about this before. Should I get into this? I'll be quick. So I just think it's fascinating. So there's this idea, there's this kind of experiment that was done where there's a guy's face, again, a kind of neutral expression. And so it's a shot of him, and then you have a shot of whatever he's looking at, and then you cut back to him again with the exact same face. So it's basically the same shot twice with an extra shot in the middle of the thing he's looking at. And so depending on what you would put in the middle, the audience, they did this experiment, and the audience will read his expression differently, just based on what he's looking at. So if you have a shot of the guy looking, this is the shot of his face, he's got a neutral expression, but he's looking at something. You cut to a mother playing with their kid, like playing hide and seek, and the kid's laughing and the mother's playing. And then you cut back to him. The audience will watch that and they say, "Oh, he's happy. He's feeling he's enjoying the scene. He thinks it's cute. What's happening there?" And then they did the experiment again, where it was like they'd show something terrifying, like an animal being ripped apart, or vultures eating a carcass or something, and they'd say, "Oh, now he's grossed out." And so each time each audience inferred his performance just by what he was looking, not actually his performance. They're looking at their reaction to what they saw actually. So the actor is kind of a blank slate. So you kind of have that with the masks in Star Wars and all these different franchises, whether it's Star Wars or Halo or superhero movies, that you can actually, the audience is actually willing to do a lot of work for you as a filmmaker. You just show them what the character's looking at. The audience will actually just take their reaction and just put that on the character. So the character doesn't actually have to do anything. So that's kind of what I did with this droid. I saw this droid look at his buddy who's sitting next to him get shot, and I inferred like, oh, he's sad, or oh, he lost his buddy. He's like, oh no, that was Fred or Jerry or whatever name it is. So that's just a psychological game that film can play. I'm not sure if that's exactly what Lucas is doing there, but I just thought it was a fun moment, and it reminded me of that aspect of the filmmaking process.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, the lifeless animated droid, right? That's pretty awesome. Yeah, I never picked up on that before. But yeah, he kind of looks at it like, whoa, what just happened?
Well, think about Vader looking at his son, and between the son and the Emperor at the end of Return of the Jedi. Like there's so much emotion in that scene, and Vader's face never changes. Like it's a magic frozen there. But you're looking at it, and you can see that it sounds so dumb, but I feel like I can see the pain in his eyes. I can feel like I can feel it. Like, especially when he's like, Luke, take my mask off, that scene later looks sad to me, or looks like tired or like injured in that scene. The mask does. I'm like, why? That's so dumb. Like, what is this weird psychological trick being played in my head? It's just crazy that works, you know. I just crazy. Love that. It's one of the cool things. The psychological tricks you can play in the audience is one of the things I like about filmmaking, and Lucas really does it well.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he does. Was there a lot of masked actors before this? Do you know? Like, is he taking a lot of inspiration? I guess you said the kabuki kind of thing.
Yeah, in theater, Greek theater, there's a lot of masks. It's had a long history in theater for sure before film showed up. I'm trying to think. In film was a lot of masks. Well, I mean, 3PO is heavily inspired by the Maschinenmensch, the Machine Man from the movie Metropolis. It was a silent German film from 1927.
Gotcha.
It's like the first science. It's an incredible film. It's like the first science fiction epic ever in film history. And there's a golden mechanical robot. I mean, it's black and white, but it's implied that the robot is like golden mechanical. It's basically the direct influence for 3PO. Direct inspiration, I should say, for 3PO. Very, very similar, but yeah, same. Except it's a woman this time, but it's the mask doesn't move, but it's the same thing. So she's acting through the mask, through the suit.
Yeah, so it's not new.
No, it's a very old idea. I don't know if it was applied to a pop culture movie like this, like such a popular film, or a science fiction kind of space opera thing before this as much, because it's like we got stormtroopers, we got Vader, we got Boba Fett, we got tons of characters, droids, and all these characters with masks on. So I don't know. It's definitely a lot. There's probably more in Star Wars than a lot of other. Also, I guess you could technically include like monster movies, like creatures in masks, like guys in suits and trying to be scary without having their face move. You know. So I don't know. There's a history of it for sure. I'm not sure. I haven't done my research into movies, I guess, with masks.
It's okay.
That specifically, but
yeah,
it's definitely an old idea though. Going back, as long as we've had story, as long as we've been putting on, dramas in front of an audience, there have been masks involved in storytelling. But Lucas definitely does it a lot, probably a lot more than other movies for
sure. Okay, yeah, I was curious if that was like something he kind of made famous or really brought to center stage, or if it's just been going on forever and I'm just a big nerd that is only kind of uncultured and focused on Star Wars.
That's me too. Like I don't know nearly as much more. I have way too much Star Wars knowledge rolling around my head that could be replaced with much more beneficial stuff. But
nice. Well, sorry, I got us off there a little bit.
No, I got us. It's again, that's our trademark at this point. Rabbit trail.
That's right.
That's how we only get through one scene per podcast.
That's right. All your listeners are probably like, "Come on, get to it."
I know. Everyone's like, "Just this is a Star Wars podcast. No one cares about film history. No one cares about all that." So,
but it's what influences this. Absolutely.
That's the thing. Is like that's kind of the whole point of this. Is like we're going to talk about the influences into Star Wars, which is filmmaking, and especially like I said in this sequence here. So now we're cutting back. We'll go back on track. We're cutting back to space, right? With Artoo.
Yeah, well, we have the what you said last time, the left to right. Anakin enters left to right, and then R2 beeps something, and he says, "Look, there they are." And then that's about it. Then we cut straight back down to the droidekas rolling into the bubble.
That's right.
Into the shield.
That's right. Because like my notes start up with the Gungan stuff here, because I feel this is the longest of these little cutaways to Padme, Anakin, and Jar Jar. I think Jar Jar has the longest one here, and the one that actually has the most to talk about, I would say. Because this is the droidekas show up, and Jar Jar. I think what's interesting about this scene, I think, is that we see Jar Jar take down a droideka very clumsily and probably unintentionally, a little bit. But again, as you saw Anakin last time we talked, you saw Anakin take down a droideka. It's the underestimated characters in this movie defeat the enemies that the Jedi don't. So the Jedi definitely could take down the droidekas, but I think it's important for the audience to see that the Jedi don't do it, that it's Anakin and Jar Jar. There's this insurmountable enemy that has stymied every opponent they face. The Jedi, Padme and her soldiers, and Jar Jar and Anakin are the ones who take him down. And so I just like that. And it's just a fun, not a huge deal, but again, it's just another statement of that theme of the underappreciated characters are actually doing a lot more than what's expected. They're going beyond the Call of Duty in ways that people wouldn't expect them to, and taking down the most difficult of opponents. I just like that.
Yeah, that's a cool theme. Yeah, and it matches with the rest of the movie. Yeah, it's neat. And that's one. Yeah, we've talked about it a bunch, but I mean, just the fact that George really likes to play up the underdog, or here's the organic army versus the mechanical army, the way less technology against technology. Yeah, it's fun. I read a comment today too in the archive book how this scene George talks about Jar Jar, how he's trying to be brave and courageous, and there is an aspect of that where it's supposed to be appreciated, right? We're supposed to see that and honor that. Like, he is stepping up to this, even though he's clumsy and insecure, is what George said there. How he just insecure caught my attention. How I guess I never really thought about Jar Jar as insecure, but that's how something George commented on this.
Yeah. It's interesting. His arc is interesting because he starts out as this exile who's he's kind of embarrassed to be around Captain Tarpals and the boss Nass. He's kind of humbled by it, and at the end of it, he's the big the bomb bad general, right? And he's he's leading troops, and he's turning back to say to his troops, steady, steady. And later on, he's like calling for them, like, retreat, retreat. He's like giving orders. He's taking charge in his very silly, goofy way. But he has grown, and he ends up having a place in the Senate later on. So his character does definitely grow. But but there's still room for the comedy. There's still room for the silliness in there. He never quite loses that. It's too intrinsically tied to who he is. He's never going to turn into a completely different character, and we don't want him to. At least I don't. I like him as the silly young, and I don't want him to turn into this, regal, perfect, majestic, like really serious character. That'd be weird. And one thing as to kind of tie it to this theme of this the kind of film history kind of references that Lucas is going through here. Pretty much, I think every single one of these gags that Jar Jar does in this battle sequence is taken from an old like silent movie comedian movie. So this gag of him with the droid attached to his foot, and like as he moves it fires like over his head. That's taken from a Buster Keaton film called The Navigator, where he has this tiny cannon strapped to his foot, and he ducks in the cannon, like hits the guy and then knocks him overboard the ship or something. I can't remember exactly, but that's a gag specifically lifted from a Buster Keaton film, and we'll get another one of those later on. But that's just another one of those little references that Jordan has peppered throughout this sequence here.
Yeah, and I remember George commenting like Jar Jar, he's supposed to be basically a cartoon character come to life. Like a Roger Rabbit almost kind of thing. So yeah, it's kind of fun to see just the goofiness there, which is so interesting because you contrast it to some of the just the battle scenes going on around him. Like, you see some Gungans just doing some pretty cool moves. Like, you see one of them right before that scene, like he takes the shield and just like deflects the blaster bolt right back at the droid. It's just really cool. It's a Jedi move, but this guy's doing with a shield, and not a Jedi. It's just kind of neat. And then some of the Gungans are, you can see some dead ones, and like there's like this pretty intense scene going on, but Jar Jar's just clumsily just blasting all these droids. Yeah, taking down the droideka. Never underestimate the small person, right?
Oh, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I noticed that last time watching Phantom Menace, watching this scene, is that the Gungans in the background, like there's this Gungan who has like a battle droid by the throat, and he's got like his little baton, he's just like smacking him in the face. Like, it's really like kind of intense and cool. But of course, it's happening in the background of this. There's this little comedy scene happening in the front. It's just, to me, it's just so funny. I just kind of laugh, but also I'm just very happy that Lucas again like sticks to what he's doing. He's not here to show this really brutal, intense fight scene between the Gungans and the droids, in the sense that you see in, say, Lord of the Rings, or even something more adult. Or as we talked about earlier, I just saw the Dune movies, and there's much more intense fighting, and that's much more a serious tone. But George is very, very clear. He's like, no, this is a lighter film. This is going to have comedy, and Jar Jar is the star of this particular sequence here, this ground battle. He's a silly comedy character. That's going to take precedence. But even in the midst of a war, even though there's dead Gungans around, I'm not going to focus on that. It's going to be a lighter tone. It's still in the spirit of fun. We're still having a fun we're having an enjoyable time with this fight. We'll definitely have darker fights to come in Star Wars, where it's much less fun and focus much more on the dead bodies and for those, I'm talking about Mustafar, everybody.
Revenge of the Sith, all the way.
Exactly, Revenge of the Sith, pretty much. Yeah, that's no surprise there. But for now, we're still very much in that, upbeat, high, fun spirited Flash Gordon movie serial tradition.
Yeah, which I think is so cool. Like, so last night, with the kids watched episode 2, and my 3-year-old daughter. I mean, we had to skip a little bit, particularly the Tusken Raiders stuff, and a little bit. I didn't show her the arena battle with the actual monsters because she loves Padme, and I didn't want to have her see the I can't remember the name of that cat monster, but that scratches Padme, But otherwise, I mean, she loved every bit of it, even the Geonosians. I thought she'd be freaked out by it, but she was like, "Those are gross looking bugs," and that was like as far as she went, And this is the same girl that like freaked out watching Cinderella, and every time the stepmom would come on, she'd like run out of the room in tears and stuff. I was like, wow,
that's funny.
But she like loves these movies and isn't bothered by it. And I just told Kelly, my wife, last night, I was like, man, this is a testimony of the way that George made these with kids in mind. You know what I mean? Like, here's my 4-year-old daughter or 3-year-old daughter who's like totally not bothered by these movies, and I really appreciated that, And it's just kind of fun to be on this side of it now as an adult, watching it through the eyes of my kids and seeing how much they just love it. Like, none of them are bothered by this stuff. So I appreciate that. As we were contrasting that, Ken and I were talking about that, like contrast that to the Indiana Jones series, like the very first movie, for example. Oh my goodness, I'm blanking the names. Not Last Crusade, Lost Ark, right? Raiders of the Lost Ark. The movie's awful as far as like if you're trying to watch like if you're a little 4-year-old kid and you're trying to watch this and the guy's face is melting off and there's blood all over the place. Oh man, I mean, just what a contrast,
Yeah, it's true. It's funny because there was a lot of closing my eyes during that. When I was a kid, I watched all these movies as a little kid. But there was whole swaths of the Indiana Jones movies that I did not see. And it's actually funny. The ending of Return of Return of the Jedi. What's it called? Raiders.
Yeah.
We both can't think of the name. Raiders of the Lost Ark. The ending of that movie, I only heard that scene for like the longest time because I was always had my eyes closed. And the images that were conjured in my brain, just hearing it, was way worse than what was on screen. It was way more hellish and more graphic and more disturbing. Just because all I can't talk. All I had was that music and the sound effects and John Williams' music and everything. It's incredible, but it's very, very scary. Yeah. And when I finally saw it, I was like, oh, this is tame. This is way really is bad. I was like, Mom, Dad, you should have just showed me this to begin with, because what was in my head, what I was imagining was way worse.
I've heard
that kind of backfired on them, but
yeah, and I've heard that's a horror movie tactic. Like, let the audience fill in the blank because it's going to be far more frightening than what you can come up with. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Like we talked about earlier, like the audience is willing to do a lot of work for you as a creator. You just can't let them know that they're doing that. And in defense, I'm on your daughter's side too, because when I was a kid, Lady Tremaine and Cinderella scared me too, and I was totally fine with this movie, but I was terrified of the
so
it's interesting how cartoon can be way more intense. Old lady in a purple dress can be terrifying, and dead Gungans everywhere. It isn't, but well.
Yeah, I know, right? And the same with my older son. Like, he can't handle Tangled. He can't handle the evil lady. I can't remember her name either. But the
Mother Gothel.
Fake, Mother Gothel, the fake mom or whatever. He can't handle it. And he's significantly older than my daughter, but they love Star Wars. It doesn't bother them at all, and it's just cool. I don't know, just because the other movies hit closer to home. They're more like real life stuff, and like this isn't. Like, we don't see Gungans in real life.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know. There's probably something really deep there, but all I have to say is I just really appreciate George keeping kids in mind. I mean, I really appreciated that with growing up with these, but also now as a father, and I really appreciate that, because the way Disney's taking Star Wars, they're trying to get more gritty and more adult, and it's a lot of people are just saying, like Andor, for example. I shouldn't say everyone, but most people I've heard say is like, it's a really good series, but it's not Star Wars. It doesn't feel right. And it's interesting to see that
it's made for an adult fan base rather than for a younger audience. I agree. You definitely see that change. That's for sure.
And that is what Star Wars is made for, right? And to teach kids good and right and wrong and good and evil, and
Well,
I appreciate
that's
that.
what mythology is. Yeah. That's
Mhm.
what, that's the village gathered around the campfire. Thousands of years ago, everyone was gathered around the campfire and they would tell stories, and the kids would these kids were hearing it for the first time. Or they'd have a storyteller. George Lucas has actually talked about this, where talked about the idea there was a traveling storyteller who went from place to place, village to village, and his job was to remember all the stories of their culture and to tell them whenever he traveled to a new place. Everyone, oh, the storyteller's here. Okay, tonight we're gonna have a big fire, we're gonna have a big feast, and we're all gonna listen to the stories from our past that I heard as a kid. Now my kid gets to hear it, and that's basically what we're doing here. And so that's what mythology is. It's usually fairy stories and legends. They kind of skew younger a lot of the times. Not all the time, but a lot of times they do, because that's when the lessons need to be learned. That's when those ideas take root. That's when they're most effective. Because as you get older, life becomes more nuanced, and those clear ideas can sometimes deteriorate or become more complicated. It becomes harder to navigate those things. And so the clear cut, right, wrong, good versus evil, that is, I think, most effective and is usually reserved for kids. And that's definitely what Lucas had in mind. And you're right. He's totally consistent with it. It keeps going through all these scenes, even though we're fighting a demon over a pit. It's not too intense for your 4-year-old, right? So
which I just really appreciate. Thanks, George. But I also appreciate too, he didn't dumb it down. Like these are big real life lessons. Because like we're not watching this and be like, oh, I'm so bored as adults. You know what I mean? Like it's not like those oh man, like those really preschool level kind of stuff where it's like they dumb down these things and don't even really address real life because they think they can't handle it. But it's like, man, we're all humans. And I just feel like George understood that. Like, yes, it's kids, but they understand this. They understand this stuff. They understand right and wrong. They understand good versus evil. Yeah, they may not be able to write a PhD on it, but they get it. He doesn't look down on kids either. And I just really appreciate that balance. He just nails that so well, which I think is why you and I can talk about this in our 20s and 30s, and why we have like guys like on Rebel Force Radio, in their 50s talking about this kind of stuff, 40s, 50s. It's like, man, he hits on real life human experiences. It doesn't dumb them down, but we don't need to just make them gross and graphic either. You know what I mean? And I appreciate that. So anyway, I can go on that, but as a father, I just think it's super cool. And that scene made me think about that, which is, it's like we're literally watching a war. And my 4-year-old, 3-year-olds, they love it. It's just cool. They can watch it. I feel totally safe letting them watch it too. Pretty neat. Rabbit trail, but it's good. I like it.
No, great rabbit trail. Yep, it's important. Yeah. So it's all that's happening here. It's definitely it's not rabbit trail. We're on point. We're still
that's right
on topic, I'd say. Yeah. But I think we cut back to the lightsaber duel, right?
Space battle. Yeah.
Oh, space battle.
This is when they this overhead look on top of that ship, and the Naboo fighters are kind of spinning, and like that slow spin down, descending upon the ship, and the guy blows up, and they're shooting the bombs at the shields. Right. So cool.
There's a cool piece of Ralph McQuarrie art for the very, very first Star Wars that I think this shot you're talking about is very reminiscent of that piece of art. I'm not sure if it was directly inspired by that, but it's very, very similar. It always reminds me of that piece of art. It's you've definitely seen it. I see if I can describe it. It's the Death Star, and it's Y-wings kind of coming at like they're kind of flying past you, and you're looking at the Death Star as they're flying toward you, kind of spinning, arcing toward it. And this shot always reminds me of that. It's a great shot. Yeah.
Oh man, it's so cool. I'm a huge sucker for space battles. I love space battles. Always have. And this is just really cool. This is kind of the continuing the theme. Like we've seen really cool space battles, but in the original trilogy at this point, but this one's still it's different. Like George is just adding that. We're gonna just change it a little bit. It's gonna be different than we've ever seen before. And it's just kind of fun. And I like the aspect of like watching a kid in space. Like, what's he gonna do? Yeah. And you get the voice of reason. I love Artoo because he's such a range of emotions. Because sometimes Artoo is just like he's bold. He's gonna push 3PO off the ledge to go save his friends. But at the same time, like here, he's like, let's go back. Artoo still has that like he's such a just like a dog. Like sometimes he's super aggressive. I'm gonna be into it and bold, but sometimes like no, let's run away right now.
Yeah.
That's just totally Artoo. And I appreciate we get a little glimpse of Anakin's boldness here. Maybe some cockiness, but just like, okay, no, we're gonna stick this out, and we're gonna try some tricks, and he gets a little bit of dumb luck too, like Jar Jar. Like he tries to spin thing and one of the droids blows up,
Yeah.
It's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's interesting when Anakin says, Qui-Gon told me to stay in this cockpit, so that's what I'm going to do. It reminds me, I don't know if this is intentional on Lucas's part, but it reminds me of a movie you just saw, Attack of the Clones, where Anakin says, you heard Master Windu give me strict orders to stay here. It's just kind of similar attitude, even though his motivation is different there. And he's trying to he's trying to get away with something, there he's trying to avoid something. But just that, yeah, that sounds like a very Anakin thing.
It is, yeah.
There's a bit of arrogance there, a bit of there's an attitude there that's consistent with who he becomes later.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because you think about it, they actually play that up very intentionally in the Clone Wars, where Anakin's known for disobeying orders, and but he even tells Ahsoka, like, no, it's because she's like, you disobey orders all the time, and he said, well, no, it's just the way you go about it. Exactly. We listen to the council, but we don't do it necessarily the way they want us to do it. And we see that here. It started right from the beginning. I never caught that before. That's a good point.
Well, that's a very Skywalker trait, right? Because that's what Padme has that quality as well. That's something they share, which is kind of how they get together. Like, we're gonna get married, but we're not going to tell anybody about it. We're gonna, it's not against the rules for the Jedi, and it's not good for a senator to do this. We're gonna kind of, or it's kind of skirt around the issue a bit and kind of not technically do anything wrong, but how Luke kind of makes his way through. Like, Padme's like, you're instructed to protect me, and I'm going to go save Obi-Wan. So in order for you to protect me, we're actually also going to have to go. So they just, kind of fudging the rules a bit. It's a very Skywalker thing. So, and they both have that. So of course their kids are definitely going to have that.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of Qui-Gon a little bit, but it's just funny, especially as we see later, like how just that grates on Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
And he talks about that. George talks about that in the book. I read that again today, how Obi-Wan's supposed to be kind of the stiff. Like, he's the rule follower. He does it by the book. And he's always, like we've talked about, he's always contrasted with these guys, putting his life to loosen him up a little bit. Luke and Anakin and Qui-Gon. Yeah.
Well, that's just great characters, right? If you have characters who are always opposite of each other, always getting on each other's nerves, always butting up against each other, causing that friction. That's drama. That's humor. That's all this stuff we like in storytelling. So yeah. I think, I'm not sure where it is because it doesn't end up in the final movie, but I have a little script tidbit that revealed something that was a huge, like, it makes so much sense. Something clicked in my head once I realized that. So I don't know exactly where it happens, but it happens with Anakin and Artoo. I think it happens in this moment where I'll try spinning, or does this scene end with him saying, I know we're in trouble, just hang on? Okay, I'm pretty sure. I think this is where this line falls in the script, but it starts off with Artoo, beeping something, like screaming frantically, like, hey, Anakin, what are we doing? And Anakin responds by saying, I know, Artoo, this isn't pod racing. Which sets up to them later saying, now this is pod racing. Which I never understood. Like, there's a setup to that line that we didn't get in the final. Because as it stands, the line still works by itself, but it originally was a callback to this one where he said, okay, I know, like, this isn't pod racing. I don't know what I'm doing. This is crazy. And then later on, succeeded, and he's in his zone. He's like, now this is pod racing. It's like, okay, that's interesting. That makes sense in that new context from the script. So I thought that was kind of fun.
Yeah, that is cool. Yeah, I also like, by the way, speaking of R2, how they just show that little nod to Empire Strikes Back, where R2's words are being translated on the screen on the dash of the fighter. I think that's cool. We get that again here. Yeah, little Arabish, the language there being translated is kind of cool. How do they understand what R2 says?
Yeah, that always bothered me in Clone Wars, where all of a sudden everyone could just understand R2 all the time. That's one thing that bothered me. I was like, I understand why, because you can't always have a little screen everywhere you go. But part of me was just like, and a lot of it is they're just kind of inferring what he's saying. They're just kind of like you talk to a dog, like, oh, really? Is that what you're not actually having a conversation with your dog, but you're filling in his side of the conversation in your head. That's kind of what they're doing. But I always wanted more of that screen translating thing from R2D2. I always wanted like more translation of what R2D2 actually said, even though it's in Arabic. So I guess I never actually bothered translating the Arabic. Did you ever do that?
No, I never did either.
I just saw that for the first time. Why didn't I do that? Oh, I need to go back and translate the Arabic and see what he actually says there.
Yeah, good question.
Hardcore Star Wars nerds and listeners going, what are they talking about? Arabic is the alphabet of the Star Wars. Not the only one, but it's one of the many alphabets of the Star Wars universe. So a lot of the text you see is in this language. Each letter has a one-to-one corresponds to a letter in the English alphabet. So you can't actually translate what he says there on that screen. I don't think I know what he says.
I don't either. Good question. I'm sure someone's out there.
We should go back to it. It's just not that interesting. We should go back because Anakin says go back. But
yeah, and I also think it's cool. This is something I don't know. We've talked about like how the fleet has gone in this scene. It's just one ship left, and it strikes me because this is like Naboo's throwing everything they got at it, and it's just one ship, and they just can't. I mean, they get out barely because of what Anakin did, so it's like they've just been so wiped out if the Trade Federation left their fleet there. And I mean, that's just kind of the theme of this. It's just like the Trade Federation is so strong, the odds are so against them. And it's just kind of a neat nod to that, to see them struggle so much against just one battleship. So it's kind of a neat callback there.
Yeah, like Panaka says, we have no army, right? They have security volunteers, and they have these, ships that are probably meant just as escorts for the Queen's ship, because there's not tons of them. So yeah, if it was more than one ship, that's a good point. I never thought about that tiny little, I don't know the terms for
squadron, maybe something like that.
Squadron, something like that. Yeah, some tiny little group of ships would not be enough. Because there's vulture droids flying everywhere. Also, that's another new thing is we've never seen like droid ships before. Like autonomous ships flying around. So that was a new thing here. But
it is cool. Really a hark back to episode 4, right? Where it's just like the odds are so stacked against them.
Yeah.
It's just one lucky shot, father and son, that destroys it.
Exactly. This is 100% an analog to the Battle of Yavin with Luke and the Death Star for sure. Right down to R2D2 and everything.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like you said, it's poetry. It rhymes.
And I also just love that Anakin and R2's relationship kind of starts here. You see a lot of that in Clone Wars and in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. And we've seen them interact before in this movie, but this is kind of where they're kind of trauma bonded here. They both go through a harrowing experience together. And even though they're separated for 10 years after this, that bond is formed. And so they're very happy to see each other again. Why does Padme give R2D2 as a gift to Anakin for why do they exchange droids as wedding presents? Because that relationship works, and they're a good pair, just like Luke and R2 become a great pair later on.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, that's it for this episode. Join us in the next one as we continue our series on the Phantom Menace. As always, thanks for listening, and on to the next one.